Hello everybody, this is War Story Video Blog, and here is Bill, and I would ask him about some of his items here in the Baltimore Military Antique Show. Hello Bill.
Hi, good to meet you.
Nice to meet you. And could you explain about some of your items here on your table? There is a lot of good stuff.
Yeah, variety.
And could you explain about the first about the?
Yeah, it's a Deutschland Airwachen pole top for the Deutschland Airwachen standard. It's actually the nicest one I've ever seen. Interesting story behind it. It was found in a wall, wrapped in a sheet in a house that was being remodeled in the Bronx.
And where?
In the Bronx, New York City. And the people contacted me, and I actually ended up buying it from another person from them people. So there was kind of a middleman. Yeah. But these are quite rare. I think there were only about 850, 875 of these were actually made and issued. They were made by a company called Otto Gahr, who were premier. They were silversmiths. That's the company name right there. They were silversmiths, and they made they made the SS honor rings and a lot of Hitler's personal silver items. And they'll always be dated 23, and then they say Otto Gahr on the back. And that's one of my nicer German items.
And how much is it?
$34,000.
That's interesting. And how often do you see in the market?
I've personally owned. This is the second or third one of these that I've owned in like 25 years.
Very impressive trophy.
Yeah, the gilding is actually really, really, you can see a little bit of tarnishing where the lacquer is still mostly intact over the gilding. I think they gilded it and then they lacquered it to preserve the gilding, the color of the gilding.
And it's important to say that these items is a very good trophy. It's not about supporting Nazis or
not at
something
all,
like
not
that.
at all.
It's
a historically significant item.
Because maybe American veteran would bring back.
And it was important to him. And it ended up being in a wall, wrapped up in a sheet. So, who knows what the story is there, but that's long lost. The people that were remodeling the house actually found it. And that's indirectly who I bought it through. But we also deal with Japanese antique swords. It's a Taiwanese official. They call them Japanese territory or Japanese provincial dirks. And there were various ones. This one is for Formosa or Taiwan. They had them for China. They had them for Manchuria specifically, and Siam at the time, which is, and then I think Asia, Southeast Asia. They had there were many different, territory dirks, but this particular dirk is the nicest one I've ever seen.
Because
gilding is perfect, virtually perfect. A lot of them have black handles where the same is dyed black. This one has a white handle, which was probably a special order piece. And then the blade is also just extremely mint.
Looks perfect.
And then on these particular dirks, a lot of times they'll have the manufacturer, the maker of the fittings, will have a stamp. This one I believe is SA. I'd have to look up what Arsenal made them, but some of them, some of them were made by Soya. There were different companies that made these, and you could You could order them.
And SA, what does it mean?
It's the
Manufacturer?
company, yeah. But there were several manufacturers. But this is about as deluxe
Yeah, it's true.
as a dirk as you could find. You know, all of the highlights are chased, burnished. You know, and then the gilding is just extremely nice. The ray skin scabbard's in perfect condition.
And so,
you
and
just-
it's looks like traditional Japanese.
Yeah, like a Japanese navy dirk.
And you have several Japanese.
Yeah,
dirks?
many.
Yes. Could
and
you explain about these dirks one by one, maybe?
Sure. So this is the earliest pattern of the Japanese navy dirk.
Oldest pattern.
The oldest pattern. It's called an 1883 pattern. Similar to the 1883 pattern navy sword. And these were pretty neat how they made them. These flowers are actually separate pieces that are applied to the scabbard. So they basically, later on, they got away from having these application of these separate flowers. And then they changed from the boar's eye pattern to a later pattern which has a solid top. So this is a later pattern. So you can actually see the difference in the cutouts, where the top piece, the kashira, has a cutout piece in the center. You know, and you can see the difference in the style. But they're both navy dirks.
I just bought this one next door table. And what do you think about this?
Oh, the gilding is perfect. I mean, this is the nicest one that I've seen. I was actually on my way over to buy it when Alex was buying it. But the blade is perfect.
And in my opinion, it's handmade blade.
Yeah, it's a handmade blade. Yep. Yeah, you can see the temper line, the hamon. Where a lot of times they'll have an etched faux temper line, but the gilding is still real frosty. This is 125 years old.
And this one is model
1883 pattern, navy. So it would have been worn during the Russo-Japanese War.
And the same model here on your table.
Yep. This one is an army, and the way you can tell an army from a navy, obviously the scabbard's a little bit different, but on the handle on the armies, they have this little bump down with the cherry blossom in it, where the navies are just straight across on the D guard. And this is also a Russo-Japanese War period blade, but you can see the difference in the D guard and in the scabbards. Navies are typically worn with two hangers, cutting edge down, tachi style they call it. And the armies are typically worn katana style with the cutting edge up. But this one's exceptional. It really is.
Okay, thank you very much. Bill, could you explain about your swords one by one, please?
Sure. With Japanese swords are a little unique in that you can have World War II era mounts, but a lot of times you'll have traditionally made or even sometimes older swords that they remounted for the war. And on here you've got, Russo-Japanese War Army.
Russo-Japanese War is
Kyugunto.
yeah.
The army is the gunto. These are both armies. These three are World War II era blades, but traditionally made. This is a late war, kind of a rare variant of a Type 44 mount, but army. A lot of
And
people.
very interesting thing here, very interesting detail is a cover for the handle.
Yeah, rarely. A lot of times these covers are lost or destroyed.
It's only one I've seen here in Baltimore show.
And so this was a combat cover. This protected the silk wrapped handle, the ito, in the jungle. Sometimes you'll see them with cloth wrapped over. But this fits down over and covers the tsuba and fits tight, basically protecting the sword from foul weather cover. So often they'll have these combat covers on them. And some more army swords. Here's a World War II Japanese Navy, a kaigunto. This one has an older blade. This particular blade's from the 1600s. Not in full polish, but it's decent. You can see it. So here you have an example of one that has a blade that's several hundred years old.
How much is it?
I don't have the price on it, but it's like $2,800. I'd have to look at my book, the inventory number. And it's papered. I submitted it for a paper for there's a couple of groups that come to the U.S. every year. Yeah, so every couple of years they come and they do papers, do an appraisal on the sword, tell you what it is. They don't give a value, but they tell you the school that they think it is, and the period it's from. And a lot of times we know what that is. If you study Japanese swords fit into categories, type of hamon, grain, style, and you can determine the school and the age. This particular sword is a koto blade. It's again an army mount, but really minty gunto mounts, early style mounts with the smooth painted scabbard. This blade was made about 1550. It's signed.
Quite old.
Yeah. So this was a family heirloom that the soldier brought with him to fight in war. And the Japanese used these swords. They actually used them. But again, the gilding is quite good on it. There's some scuffs on the blade, but overall it's pretty good, the condition.
But it's important how do you put it on the scabbard and how
Yeah, there's a proper way to handle them. Never touch the blade itself. They rust. It's a high carbon steel, so they rust. But when you take a sword out, not as a martial arts person, but if you're taking it out to look at it, you take it out cutting edge up, you open, they have a push button, these guntos. A lot of times you push the button, pull it out, and then you slide it out gently, and it comes out almost like a train on a railroad track. It rolls out almost. And then you look at the sword. A lot of times you'll take a rag, rest it under the blade, and look at the different features of the temper line and the grain. You got to be really careful because they're like razor blades. We've had people at shows cut themselves and cut arteries. And then when you're returning it back, you rest the point at the throat of the scabbard, the koguchi, and just gently slide it in and it rolls back in. And that's the proper way to take them in and out. Never touch the blade. You're technically not supposed to speak over the blade while you're looking at it. As I'm about to drop it on the floor.
That's interesting, thank you. And there is a special box here.
Yeah, these are Scottish skindoos. And most of these were made from... Sure. Most of these were made in the Victorian area, like 1870s, 1880s. But there are some in here that are older, like this one is from the 1700s. And then they gradually progress older or newer as they get older, up to about 1880. Right, is about the latest one you have in there.
All these items are military guys.
Well, they're Scottish. They're the stocking knives that the Scottish wore in their sock, or hid in their sock. Yeah, it was kind of a concealed weapon. They used them for everything, though. Black knife, yeah, skindu. But some of them are quite nice. You can see the prices on them. Typically, they'll have a Caragorn or smoky quartz. A lot of times, the silver is hallmarked.
And I read about the stone. It means part of motherland with them.
Yeah, so I mean, they were
It's very symbolic.
Yeah, very symbolic. And these style knives go back to medieval times, maybe even earlier.
Like a small razor.
But they're razor sharp. I mean, they really are. We had a guy cut himself at one of our tables with one of these, and he was bleeding really bad. But they can be quite elaborate.
Missing leathers because of sweat.
Yeah, like for instance, this one, the leather, because it was close to the skin, the leather virtually rotted off.
On the top of your table, you have a glitch.
Glitch.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's Turkish. Probably 1700s. Damascus blade. So these were, this one is Turkish, but it's a traditional Islamic sword. It's called a Mameluke. The blade style is called a Mameluke. The Marine Corps actually adopted that sword style in the early 1800s. Probably after they encountered the Muslim fighters in North Africa, seeing that it was a pretty formidable weapon. But they have an Islamic saying on the blade, usually in gold or silver.
Okay, and did you translate it?
I haven't.
Okay, but it's very interesting.
Yeah. Yep. This is the koshirai for a much older sword. These mounts are Higo traditional Higo style mounts. Actually, super quality. If you can macro in on the Tsuba and the
Try.
Fuchikashira. Really quite good.
And this steel
Yeah, iron. Yep.
iron with gilt. And look at that.
Yep. And there's a dragon. Cloud dragons is the motif. And everything matches from top to bottom.
And what period is it?
The mounts are Edo period, probably 1700s, maybe early 1700s. All of the parts are matching. I'm missing the Kozuka and Kogai, which would be pretty hard to get, pretty hard to find in that exact motif. But the lacquer is almost in perfect condition. This lacquer is 300 years old.
It's very nice.
And this
How
sword,
much is it?
this blade in Koshirai is 21,000. It has a replica of the actual sword made. When we send them to Japan and have them restored, they make a replica of the blade in Howood, Hanoki, and that's what holds the Koshirai together. And then here's the actual blade, which I sent over for polish and paper to the sword museum. It says Rai Kunizane. That's who made this sword. They attributed it actually to a smith, which is a little unusual today. The former director of the Sword Museum does what they call Sayagaki, where he describes the blade, what it is, the length, and then he signs it on the bottom. Mr. Tanobe is Sayagaki, and he's describing the features of the blade. But this blade was actually made about 1280, I think, is when this guy worked. He was one of the last of the Rai smiths. And this is what the sword looks like after polish.
You send it to...
You send it to Japan, and then you specify, obviously. What I do is I direct where I want it to go. I have specific polishers that I like.
That's very interesting.
And then the horses. Notice the horses on the habaki. I actually wanted it. Usually you have a new habaki made, but I wanted to keep this one because of the horses. The original owner probably was a horseman, and so horses were important to him. So he kept, he had a little honorific engraving on his habaki.
And this one is really old.
And a lot of times older swords will have been shortened. I'll actually take the handle off here. And when they shortened them from the back side of the sword. They lost the signature. The signature on this sword would have probably been around here. And if you look down, you can kind of see the natural curvature of the blade. If you look at where the ridge of the nakago, where it goes. So most of the curvature was probably back towards the back of the blade, which is characteristic of an older sword. So now you can understand why so many swords are not signed or have lost their signature because they've been shortened. Once in a while, you'll see a sword where they'll take the signature and cut it into a panel and inlay it into the nakago. They'll also sometimes fold the very end of the nakago over where the signature is, and it'll be upside down, folded into the nakago. They'll cut a little cutout for it and actually push it down into there.
Bill, I would like to ask you about these banners.
Yeah, these are trumpet banners and drum skirts in the upper portion of the case. Sorry, it's a little noisy because it's the end of the show.
Yeah.
This is actually an Allgemeine SS trumpet banner underneath an Adolf Hitler presentation frame, silver frame. He gave these to his friends and important people in Germany with a little signature and saying he's happy that for something or whatever. But this particular trumpet banner was for an SS group, SSOA Rhine, and they were in that Rhine region. The embroidery on these is pretty much the same in all of them, and on the back they have the SS ruins. And then this one, these are SS trumpet banners. These are pre-1937 with the early style eagle, and then the SS runes on back.
And how much are
these are the three. I have a matching set of three. I have a drum skirt and two trumpet banners. These are like 40,000. This one's 40,000 for just the one.
Okay.
These are a more desirable pattern. Everybody recognizes these.
Yeah, because of its very interesting and rare trophies.
Yeah, these actually, interesting story about these. These came from originally a U.S. general had brought these back as a souvenir from World War II, and he sometime in the late 70s he bought a plantation in Guatemala, and in the early 80s, and I think 1981, he was murdered by leftist guerrillas when they raided his estate. And a friend of his bought them or ended up with them, and I bought them from him just about a year ago.
No.
Along with a bunch of other stuff and some of the general's personal artifacts.
Okay.
So you never know where you're going to find some of this stuff.
Yeah.
I bought Japanese swords out of Argentina.
Really?
Yeah. So.
That's interesting. Okay, thank you very much for
Thank
your
you.
explain. Thank you. And have safe trip home.
Thank
and
you.
have a good day.
You too, thanks.